Welcome to Control Talk Now, your smart buildings video cast and podcast for the week ending August 2nd, my lovely wife's birthday, 2020. This is episode 373, where we talk about smart building controls and HVAC controls and cybersecurity, the current state of affairs, and whatever else we want to, because we are joined by your host and mine, the man, the myth, the legend, the one, the only, Kenny John Wicks Myers from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Kenny, welcome to the show. Big dog.
All right. Well, thank you, Eric. And I can tell you've been watching John Wick because I know that.
Dude, I'd never seen it before. I need our audience to tell us that I need an attorney because they ripped us off. I saw John Wick for the first time, the second one, and somebody looked at him. He was walking the room and said, there he is, the man, the myth, the legend. And he said, John Wick instead of Kenny Smyers. I go, what the heck is this about? Obviously, they've been watching Control Talk Now. But should we let him have that, Kenny, or should we sue him?
Well, he's a pretty cool, was it Keanu Reeves? How do you say that?
Keanu.
Keanu, that's what I said. Keanu, that's what I said.
You said Kanua.
I didn't. I said Keanu. That's what the guy told me to do that. No matter what you say, that's what I said. You know, if you get it corrected, for false pronunciation or mispronunciation.
It sounds like you've been in front. It sounds like you've been in front of the government Senate hearing or something like that.
I can neither confirm nor deny the presence of.
Yeah, to the best of my memory, I did not do that. But I'll have to get back to my people and check on that.
Yes, that's a great answer. Yes, sir.
Well, listen, Kenny, a couple things real quick. We got so many people wanting to come on the show now that we're going to go line them up back to back. So this is going to be a little bit longer episode. We got actually 3 fantastic guests. 2 of them are coming on together. It's going to be a little bit longer. So you might want to go load up on the beer right now, or you might just want to break it up into a couple of segments. But so stay tuned. We got some great guests coming up. But before we do that, Kenny, we want to give a special shout out to this week's show's sponsor. Tell them who's sponsoring this week's show.
I'd love to, Eric. We have Global Controls 5, and they are so excited about their new ISMA-B-MAC 36NL and their HMI panels. These guys are out of Poland, and they've hit the North American market about 2 years ago, and we met them at the AHR show, and looks to me like they're getting a share of the market. So they've got some great people, and they've got a lot of good products and
really good people.
Really feature a lot of educational stuff. So take a closer look at the IoT product of the year. Join ISMA Live to know more. And they're really excited. And it's fun to work with people that love what they do. They're proud of their products. They've got high quality engineering and high quality solutions. So it's great to introduce Global Control 5.
Right. Well, they do. And people ask, how do I get to be able to sponsor a Control Trends show? Well, if you're a Control Trends Platinum sponsor, the Control Trends Award, then you get to sponsor shows. We just rotate through our Platinum sponsors. So a special thanks to all of our Platinums, all our sponsors, and especially our Platinum sponsors. And thanks to GC5 for their support of the Control Trends Awards. And yes, as you know from last week's show, we will be having a Control Trends Awards show. It'll be a little bit different. It'll be a virtual one. And if you're interested in knowing how to sponsor that, reach out to me or Kenny, and we'll keep you posted on that. But Kenny, we got kind of diverse things. It's going to be an interesting show this week. We got somebody that is makes really cool unitary controllers. You can link them together. It's DDC systems that are expandable, for lack of a better term. They've been around for a while. And then secondly, we got some old friends that, the cybersecurity cowboy and his cohort, Fred Gordy, will be coming on a little bit later on the show. So how about introducing our first guest? And we'll start with the products, then we'll get to the cybersecurity.
Eric, I'd love to. Eric, we're going to have a great time here. We got Mark Miller. He's the business development and engineering champion at TCS Bases, which is an incredible company that has been in the business over 35 years. And back when I came back from Germany, one of the first lines I was introduced to was TCS Bases, because they were the people that were making those universal sensors and transmitters that you could literally put together on the shelf, or take them from the shelf, put them together, give them to a contractor, and he could put them into a building automation system. So welcome to the show, Mr. Mark Miller.
Welcome,
Mark.
Thank
you. Welcome. Glad to join you.
Man, we are so glad to have you here. And for our audience who might not know, tell them all about TCS Basis. I mean, among other things, you guys, rumor has it that you guys are the guys that spawned all those other great companies up in Middle Wisconsin that have, done great thermostats and sensors and everything else. But give us a little history of Basis, if you will.
TCS started off with just doing that little elbow on that low limit temperature sensor, that elbow that went into it. That was what started it off, making
The
that little
clips.
piece. The clips,
Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
We still have them available.
What was it, Q something or the QQ01 or something? I remember
Oh
that.
boy, now you're getting deep into the history that I'm not familiar with. And it started off with that basis. And then they continued on with it and said, we could do more. We could do temperature sensors. So we got into temperature sensor aspects of it, just measurement to dry temperature, and then the humidity, got into that aspect of it. And as you grow into it, it's like, well, why don't we control this? And so that's where they got into the controls. Like, well, how can we do something different? Well, the controls, the thermostats should communicate with each other, shouldn't they? And so at that time, they were dealing with just the PC platform. And so let's get them all to talk to the PC, and got into that network approach where you end up having a PC talk to your thermostats. And then from there, the innovation came around. Was like, what's the next thing to do? And so that's where they came up with the cloud. And let's get to the cloud. Let's send this information through the internet to a cloud so we can communicate to more sites that way. And so that's where we're at today. And so we ended up having the SZ series controls, the box. Actually, I have some over the back of my shoulder, and those are the ones that so many people had seen. And it's like, oh, that's kind of nice. I remember seeing those, but they weren't what today's world want, is a nice display. So that's where he developed the Ubiquistat, came up with a color display on it, gave a lot more touchscreen access to it, and gave more than what a programmable thermostat needed to be, which is more full digital controls.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's hop in right here, because if fighting words in Madison, Wisconsin, with anybody that's familiar with TCS up there, if you call their controller thermostat, even a communicating thermostat, those are fighting words. People throw down on it because it's that and so much more. But listen, before we talk more about TCS, tell us about you. How did you get in the industry? How did you wind up at TCS, and what's your background?
I was raised around salesmen. My father was a salesman. So, I really wanted to be that sales, but I liked the technical aspects of it. So got an engineering degree, and my whole emphasis was getting into sales engineering. And the idea being is understand the technical, but convey it in a fashion that people need to understand it. And so if you're dealing with an end user that really doesn't understand much, I want to be able to convey it in that fashion. You got a distributor that really says, I need to know how this works. I really need to want to understand all the details. I can describe it in that fashion. And so I just carried it forward and had the opportunity to kind of work in different segments. I worked in distribution. I work with the equipment manufacturers. I work with control environments. And it's really neat to be able to pull it all together. And the key is the controls are what drives the HVAC system. And so that's what's the exciting part about carrying it forward.
Well, listen, we're going to talk more about this, because I think the controls are there. And Kenny, we've gone through this a little bit on the show, because right now, as we're fond of saying, if you don't have a great controller or a great system, you're not in the game, right? But there are a ton of people that have that. If you don't have a great, competitive price, you're not in the game. But a ton of people have that. If you don't have great technical support, you're not in the game. A ton of people have that. The list goes on and on. And what Kenny and I are fond of saying is, at the end of the day, with so many great solutions that are very equal, it sort of gets down to the communication process. I'd like to talk a bit about that, because you said something that really keyed me in. Kenny and I think that all things being equal, the company or the person that can communicate and understand is going to be the winner.
The whole issue in our industry is relationships. And so when these customers need something, you need to be able to convey what solves their problem. And that's essentially what we do. And that's our slogan, Genius of Simple, due to the fact that we're trying to give you a complicated solution simply. And so that's what we're trying to deliver in that approach. And we do a very good job, which is the reason why people look for our controls. And maybe our approach hasn't been that we reached out to the right customers, and that's what we're trying to do. That's why joining on the distribution with StromQuest, getting into that engagement and communicating with what our solution can provide, and giving an automation system at a reasonable cost that gives them the strength to be able to do these complicated things like we're seeing in today's world. Our building sciences is really important right now as to how do we make sure we're safe? How can people get into the building safely?
Sure is. And again, I think Eric and I, we were very fond of the term race to the small space, because We keep track on some of the incredible numbers that the Department of Energy puts out, or, all these different, massive surveys about how many buildings there are in North America, and just what percentage of them have little or no control other than thermostats being turned, heat, manual settings to heat, off, cool, and then the set point, and everybody goes home, and so on, 24/7. And so, I mean, when you drive through major metropolitan areas and you drive through some of this urban sprawl, the malls you see out there, it's almost hard to believe that there's still that many buildings. We're talking, over 80% of the buildings have little or no building automation or management of their equipment, and they have very few people even have setback timers anymore, intermittent timers, or whatever you used to do. So that their market is incredibly large. Now, TCS bases used to have just a preeminence, I think, in the sensor transmitter world back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then you guys kind of went into the market and you were off the radar, our radar, of a distributor, that had, say, let's say Honeywell, Barber Coleman Siemens, all the ones that are out there, Johnson Controls, KMC.
Oh, yeah.
But because you guys always had good products, so you kind of took the marketing efforts did not come directly through the distribution forefront. It went in a different direction. Tell us about that and why what you're doing now is different.
Essentially, what customers that came to us really liked the fact that we could communicate to multiple sites at one time. And so moving into that cloud base, we ended up getting a lot of awareness, a lot of financial institutions that really liked our product, because they could reach out to many of their locations with one source. And so we put all our emphasis on that. Let's just serve this marketplace and get into that particular vertical market. And so in doing so, we faded away from where a lot of the products take place, is the distribution. And so I'm a big believer that so much of the avenue, the needs are coming through the distribution. Distribution isn't your old 1960s approach. These guys have a lot of skills. They got engineers that'll design for you. Their counter guys are the smartest ones around. Those are the go-to. Those contractors that have a problem, they go to the distribution and says, hey, I got this situation. How do I get it resolved? And that's where TCS can be that support, that answers. Like, I don't want to go to that large contractor to get a control system. Is there something that I can do and give my customers something that I can give them a quality product and I can support their avenues? And so that's where we fit in really well. And that's why we want to help you guys in your efforts with your customers.
Awesome.
Yeah, well, I want to stay on this for a minute, because obviously Kenny and I are distributors. So we're going to do the commercial for distribution, because this is how Kenny and I pay the bills, which is, Kenny and I have talked about it for a while. The traditional distributor where you just sort of sat back and waited. I think for the most part, they're not creating a lot of value. Okay. And so, Kenny and I like to have talked about in the past that if the distributor's up in their game doing a lot of the things that you talked about, Mark, they can become one of the most important pieces in the whole supply chain, right? If they're not doing that, then, if you're a contractor, then yeah, you're probably they're not creating any value. They just look like they're just taking some margin for doing nothing. And so I applaud you guys for sort of realizing the value that a distributor can create. And, Stromquist is obviously a very, very proud partner distributor of TCS. And, it's a little bit like, if you just think about it, for these manufacturers out there that maybe go direct, and some of these integrators or contractors that are buying direct. There are a couple of things that we do that for both the manufacturer and the contractor. One of them is, I'm fond of telling people, I'm kind of your bank, right? I'm your interest-free bank, and up to a point. And I mean, you know this better than anything, Mark. I mean, you guys are manufacturing product, you're financial people. It's cash flow. You got to have the stuff coming in. So among other things, for a manufacturer, a distributor offers a layer of financial protection, right? We're taking the first hit. And a lot of time with these integrators, because a lot of times it's difficult for them on the cash flow side to be able to sort of manage in the money, because a lot of times they need to get paid before they can pay, all of their bill. Hopefully they'll pay part of it. So I know that Stromquist works with our partners, to be, something that's going to work for both of us, but for an integrator or a contractor, a lot of times if you go to some of these major manufacturers, you're at 31 days, they're cutting you off. You're not getting any product. That their corporate finance people have no mercy, because I know they're that way with us. So I think, if you think about it, we serve that purpose too, sort of an intermediate banking type thing. We also stock the inventory. which for
Mhm.
manufacturers, I mean, that's a cost on the books, right? If
Mhm.
you got inventory sitting in your warehouse, that your financial people hate that, right? Because that's a cost. It's dead inventory. So if you can move it out, getting it closer to the customers, because the distributors are local, have a locality, then you're getting it out closer to your customers. At the same time, you're getting out of your warehouse, so that frees up capital for you guys to make more product or invest in R&D or whatever. For your integrators, and even though with shipping and all, it's great. A lot of times you get products in 1 or 2 days.
Mhm.
Uh, now you can walk in and get the product. So what I'm
Exactly.
saying is, for all parties involved, if a distributor's earning their money, it's some of the best money you will spend. Period. End of story. And if you call me a middleman again, we're middle value, upper value, and a middle slot. Call me fat if you want to, say I'm fat around the middle. But, in terms of distribution, but agree or disagree with that. Say more about that from your perspective, because you guys obviously see the value. And what makes a distributor work for you, and what makes a distributor not work? Let's talk about the other side of it. If a distributor's not doing the following, are they worth the margin, so to speak?
I think the decision makers or the relationship is where the distributor and that contractor comes into play. And you guys know those contractors, and that's where your terms come into play. You can offer them advantages. You give them marketing initiatives to help them succeed in their business. You need them to be successful in order for them to come back, not for just a control entity. It's for the entire offering that you bring into that fold. And so that relationship starts from there. And so what it comes to them is they trust you, and they become really your business partner. That's such an important. And us as a manufacturer are too far away from that to really build that trust and have that stream. So that's why the distribution is so much more powerful for that aspect of it. When it really that contractor comes into play of it, he wants to get everything at once. He's got a project. He's going to buy this HVAC equipment. He's going to buy his grills. He's going to buy his parts, his fittings, all of those things. That's the time to say, also give me that TCS control with it. And it's part of how that stream goes. You guys deliver them, you get it to them in a timely fashion when they need it, whether you got to crane it up, whatever those entities that you provide, all of that comes into it, and it's all part of that delivery. Now, on top of it, he needs to continue to build that relationship with that customer. Some of those guys are working with design build firms, and so they're doing regular design build opportunities with that. What they need to do is support that services, and that's having the ability of a control thermostat that they can access through a phone or from a tablet or for any PC. They can actually service that contractor, that owner, all the way through. And now they can continue to do service work, get repeatable business. That allows them to get their revenues, they can pay your bills, and they get another opportunity next time forward. And so I think the distribution is the channel that that user says, I need to fix my HVAC system. I need a contractor I can trust. They go to that contractor says, I got my good friends here at my distribution that are going to do you well. They recommend these products. I believe in those products. You have a question, you want something like an ultraviolet light, you want a special MERV 13 filter. My HVAC distributor knows how to give me the right kind of resources, and it carries right into that channel. And that's why focusing at that effort with you guys is, and the distribution is the way to go.
Mark, I wanted to kind of reset some of the things that I think are very important for our Control Trends community. Is, in other words, we already established that TCS has been in this business a long time and earned its stripes. Didn't take a marketing channel that was consistent, or a business model that was consistent with distribution, but now we're seeing in light of this COVID-19 the need for every building to get some sort of management platform. And your call sign is the genius of simple, meaning that you understand what's going on now, and what you're doing is you're coming back out, you're surging into the market, and maybe using a distribution channel approach to get to the people that need these important products. In other words, so let's just talk real quickly. So you have an enterprise energy management system, building controls from you do, tell us a little bit about where your strong points are, like your equipment controllers. Do you do VVT? Do you do, so tell us some of the kind of the applications, because you'll catch people's attention if you have a reliable product and it's well priced, and you have I see you guys got training coming up. You got the full enchilada. And so we need to make sure that people understand that TCS has a very, very large product portfolio. I think people, and by the way, before anybody forgets, that capillary clip number was QE-01. And I've sold thousands of those things. They used to come in boxes of 100 or 100, I believe. And we used to get a kick out of somebody come up and say, I want 10 clips. He said, you can't, you got to buy the whole damn box. And they said, I don't want a whole box. Well, you got to go get it somewhere. No. Anyhow, so the level of effort here, you guys got a broad scope that you need to tell everybody about. So you got the Ubiquistat is your star controller, zone controller, thermostat, however you want to do it, that links you into the cloud, links you from thermostat to thermostat. But you've also got things that require training and webinars and more sophisticated. So if people do want to get up into the back net and do want to talk the building automation, you guys have a good handshake with that, right?
Correct. And Ubiquistat has been our premier product in the recent past because the BACnet was a large portion of it. So how do you get a thermostat that can get into a BACnet network, which is essentially what everybody's trying to tie into? But we want the power of it to be able to give so much more. And so that's where the Ubiquistat gives the nice display, a lot of functions to it. But unfortunately, as we add more complexity to it, they need the support to it. It's not your typical, couple of on-off type of things. We start modulating economizer damper. We start having an economizer sequence. We start modulating for a hot water valve, or, now we've got digital compressors. They can take a 0 to 10 volt signal on that. So do we need to go to a full digital control system, or can we do that with the Ubiquistat? And so that's where our technical support comes into it, because it's not your old dad's thermostat anymore. It's now a little more complicated. Well, now we start communicating that, and we get that stat to talk to the next stat, and that stat next talks to the internet. What troubles? Where do we get that troubleshooting issues coming into it? And that's why we do more training and more technical support. So the Ubiquistat is our most recent, but you're right. We have the full gambit of controls. So like you talked about VAV, VVT, Veritrack, all of those. So there's a lot of those systems that are out there, and some of those are retrofit. Some of those are manufacturers. I just talked about one this morning. I think those guys are out of business. So you got a VVT system that you can't support it anymore. So what's your solution? And so that's why we developed a controller, and it does not only a VAV, but also a VVT operation. So you don't need different devices. You got one that do terminal box control. You say, well, I need some reheat on it. Oh, okay, we can do that. Well, I need extra electric heat, a couple of stages of that. Well, we can do that as well. They come back to a rooftop unit controller. Well, we need to be able to do the staging on that with the economizer. We want more stages. We're varying the airflow. Now we need more stages of cooling. Can we do 2, 3, 4 stages? And these are the kind of application questions that come into play. You get a water source heat pump application, more and more of those, where you say, well, we got a programmable thermostat that does this little water source heat pump. That's great. Well, we got a tower, a plant here that needs to do a boiler. We got to warm that water up. Well, we got a cooling tower. We got to warm that water down to keep those heat pumps going. We got a boiler plant controller that'll do all of that. It'll do the cooling tower and the boiler all into one. Well, we got a bypass valve. Well, it's all part of that as well. It's part of that package. Well, we got boiler systems. We got 3, 4 boilers. It's going to do our perimeter heating. Well, we got a controller for that. So we do have a full gamut of controls. There's not too many systems that you come back to us and say, we don't do that. We got them in that mix of it. What's really fun is I train our guys and train customers come into it. We get in these little features, these little on-off radio buttons to these applications. It's like, it's already built in there. Didn't even realize it was in there. We get these requests. It's like, we're going to do heat pumps in the northern market. Canada was one of them. And they said, we need to lock this thing out. How do I lock it out? Hey, it's a radio button. You just click that radio button. You tell that temperature, just deactivate it. High limits, high temperature. You got electric heat. You don't want to get over 160 degrees. Like concerned about getting too high temperature. It's a radio button. Set that temperature. Away it goes. So that's a lot of the questions. Like, can I do this? Let's answer those questions and solve those.
Well, it sounds like you guys are truly modular in your approach. And, one of the advantages for that, it seems like, Mark and Ken, is that, you could start out with, one of your control devices. You can string it together. It seems like you could start with something very small, standalone, and then go, up to, like Kenny said, stringing campuses together or whatever. Well, like I say, Mark, you guys are so modular with what you do control-wise, but you guys, you're not just thermostat type controllers, right? What else do you guys do? Talk about more of the product portfolio.
Well, as we got into the enterprise, what they ended up doing is saying, we want you to do the whole building. So we don't want just temperature controls. We just don't want a thermostat that controls that rooftop. We also have VAVA systems. We got other things. What about, we need to monitor and let us know if this freezer is going to work. We got a refrigeration rack. We need to know a temperature for the refrigeration and the freezers. And we need to use that same channel of alert and send our service distribution base to respond to that. So we got a refrigeration monitor that'll pick up those temperatures. We can pick up the refrigerant pressures, and so you can actually do troubleshooting remotely. Getting into the larger rooftop units, we do those. But a boiler themselves, a lot of places have boiler systems, and so they need to monitor that. Well, in the boilers, you also have water temperature. You can have valves, control valves. So we got a boiler control for that. And the water source heat pump. You got a neat little programmable thermostat that'll control that individual water source heat pump, but it's got a whole central plant that has a boiler to warm that temperature up as it needs to for that condenser loop, or cool it down by the cooling tower. Lighting controls, like, hey, if we're going to have you controlling our building, why don't you control our lights? So our enterprise are saying, we need that lights to go off at a regular time. We need our outdoor sign lights to go on. We may have ATMs. We need the lights to be working in those ATMs at the right time frame. We know that security is such a key with the lighting, so we need to actually occupy those temperature, the lights according to the time. So we do actually astronomical time. So therefore, you don't have to be changing it or have a photo sensor that's tied in that may not work because it failed. It actually watches your time zone and adjusts your time to the lights that go on and off according to that. So full gambit of controls within TCS.
I see you even doing energy monitoring. So that's another thing too that's critical now, especially with this energy analytics and the critical call for data. So you guys are very familiar with data, and you handled it well in the past, and now so what's your next when we see TCS? What's your next thrust? Where are you going to go? So you're going to reestablish your way with distributors across the country, and we're going to be expecting you to come and say hello to us.
Exactly. We're so anxious to be able to come out and say hello to everybody and carry more information. What's happening is that the sophistication of the control sequence in HVAC continue to grow, and ASHRAE is really driving into the advanced control sequences for high performance buildings. So we need to continue to adapt those controls into an application specific controller. So that is just radio buttons to turn these controls on and off. So you say, well, ASHRAE says I can do this to get a high performance building. How do I do that? Do I need to hire a control contractor that can do all these sophisticated controls that when he leaves, I have no idea how it's doing? So that's really a next evolution to get into that. The cloud base, getting in more information into that. The analytics are driving so much of this. How can our control systems adapt to what needs to be done? How can it tell us before the equipment fails? It's great. Everybody can tell you when it fails, but how can we tell it before it fails? How can it tell us that that cooling system is not performing at this outside air temperature like it should? Should notify it. We need to do that. And our enterprise are actually doing that same type of thing. You say, we don't want to dispatch a truck, which can cost anywhere from $400 to $700 a call. We need to dispatch that truck when we're scheduling to do it. We're going to do preventive maintenance in 2 weeks. So this analytics can tell us that this unit isn't working properly. It's fine for now. In 2 weeks, we need to do more thorough diagnostics with this to identify what it is. And energy side of it, yes, we pull in electrical information. We can pick pulse meter off of gas meters and such. What's really powerful about our approach is we gather every trend data, every minute, 100% of the data. And we retain all of that information that makes it available. The ability diagnostics, any kind of mechanical service is impeccable. You can look at every one of your temperatures, you can identify. I just watched a webinar about how trends at a 15-minute, 10-minute increment can completely miss problems that you have with your system. If you don't have the detailed per minute, will you be able to understand the mechanics that are taking place and when you're having trouble with it? And so we retain all of that up in our cloud. So it's not like you have to have a huge server in your computer in your building. We retain all of that information, and it's accessible again by a cell phone, tablet, or a PC. And that's where the analytic guys are approaching us all the time. It's like, you got tons of data. Give us data so that we can learn how these analytics should play into it. And so that's our next evolution is how do we take that data that we have and how can we make it more effective for that user?
We'll talk about that, Mark. So you don't even, it sounds like if it's in the cloud, you don't even have to have a special software program or anything, right? I mean, so if I'm a service contractor, I can just log in and gather all that data, use it for troubleshooting or whatever else. You can probably even create reports for my customer if I want to.
Exactly. You can generate graphical trends. And so it is available from any browser. So whatever browser you choose, we check them all. So you can access it anywhere. So I've literally taken my phone, generated a graph of a trend, be able to do a screenshot and send it forward and say, I just want to let you know your temperatures are doing well. It started off on the right time and the comfortable were appropriate. You can download that data in a CSV file. You can end up going and analyzing that trend and the information.
So are you ready for a loaded question?
Yes,
so
I love it.
With all this stuff, how much do you guys charge for that software?
We don't charge anything for software.
Well,
we have
hang
a
on
subscription
a second.
fee.
Whoa. Well, there is a slight subscription fee. Okay, well that's
So
that's okay. That makes a lot of sense. But you know, Kenny, a trend we've seen with a lot of the service contractors, because if you think about you know, if you're a service contractor, your service contractors, I mean, your contractor gold, right? They allow predictability in your business. You know, they know that for every service contract they have, they're going to produce X amount of revenue, and just in terms of what they charge for the contract, X amount of revenue and upgrades, X amount of revenue and equipment sales. I mean, they're golden. I mean, if you're a service contractor, you protect it. That's probably the biggest asset you have. But that business is getting more competitive because as the owners become more savvy, they're going to want things. They're going to want the value adds, like somebody calling up and saying, hey, or sending a text going, hey, just to let you know, I know you got a big event planned this week. All systems are go. Everything's checked out. Everything's working. And that really costs you nothing if you have the ability to provide, to have that. So, we know there are other vendors where they have similar type products where the service contractor will go in and actually put those in a system in with a guaranteed service contract for 2 or 3 years, right? Because it pays for itself and allows them to offer higher levels of service. So, I think this product, among other things, is really well suited for our contractor listeners out there that are really trying to look for ways to create more value for their service contracts.
So what part of it comes into the play is that if that owner has access to that information, the service contractor has access to that information, and even the distributor has access. So you can really support it. You can actually share in that screen that owner can say, something doesn't seem right here. The service contractor can say, well, Mrs. Smith, let me take a look at it and see what's going on. Oh, I see what's happening. No, you're fine. Things are working properly. And so no cost for software for that owner, for that contractor or the distributor.
Well, Mark, hang on one second, Kenny. As Kenny's really fond of saying, Mark, too, because, again, we live in a litigious society. I hate to talk about the elephant in the room, but, if something goes wrong, somebody's pointing fingers, right? And as Ken Smyers is fond of saying, in God we trust, and all else get data. So this is a really inexpensive way to do that, right, Kenny?
Well, I can't argue with that. That's the real that value. Data has value. That is the new currency, and there's a lot to that. But the thing that, Mark, I am hearing you say something, but you better include the user in that configuration, that interface. COVID-19 has really introduced a whole lot of pressure on building facility managers, building owners. They got some real troubles. They got woes that they're going to have 30% less people and more competitive pricing than ever, and they've got to demonstrate with unequivocal proof and demonstration that they've got temperature, pressure, and humidity under control. And they need to expose that. They need to be transparent. And so when you're talking about remote monitoring is great and control, you've got to do it. Advanced diagnostics is definitely the future, because the equipment manufacturers are getting smarter, and they're putting that smarts out there to be integrated by somebody's service. Somebody's building automation, somebody's thermostat. It needs to hear what this thing's saying. If it starts to hiccup or whatever, it can send that either directly to the home base, or it can bring it through the building automation system. So, that's critical too. And then the weather integration, like you're saying, as we get crazier and crazier weather patterns, you get the ability to look out 3-4 days in advance and see what's coming. And, and then you can take advantage of that when you're using your energy, so that if there's a good chance to preheat or pre-cool your facility in advance of what's coming down the road, that's the smarts that people are driving. But I think another thing too is so critical is that they're surveying how many people feel as though the building they work in, is it safe to return? how many people feel like they want to send their children into that school building without knowing who's done what, where, and when? And so when you can expose and reveal that, then you've helped everybody get back into a better comfort, zone about re-entering things and doing stuff. So I think what you got there is you got a great service. I just wanted to remind everybody, I can't help but cherry pick as we talked, but you all go back to 1983, and you actually introduced the first network thermostat in 1993, and you elevated it to a based EMS platform for multiple locations, advanced reporting in 2008, Zigbee wireless in 2010, 2014, you had enterprise data analytics. So back in 2014, TCS Bases was pumping out data analytics and making it available for enterprise level. So people that had national portfolios. 2016, the Ubiquistat came out. 2018, the QD34 BACnet edge device. And then finally, your Ubiquistat came into the Wi-Fi world, where we see Wi-Fi is going to continue to just grab more market share because of its immediacy and deployment. Its reliability has gone up. The survey tools, there's no more the dumb mistakes of putting things behind walls and steel, glass and reflections. We've all got a little bit smarter with wireless, but how do you see your wireless products taking off? Is that something you've seen an increase in those sales?
At this point, the awareness is just getting aware, getting into it. So we haven't done as much. We do it differently. And so many of these people want an IP address that goes to a phone. So we don't want to create a whole separate network. So we tie into the existing Wi-Fi system. And from there, we go into our own gateway, our edge device that comes out of it, and it goes to the cloud. So therefore, you don't have to put one in if you don't have, if you already have a Wi-Fi system in. And so some of those approaches are saying, well, we got to have a separate Wi-Fi network, or we're just going to pick up individual IP addresses. One of the concerns we get into the Wi-Fi is security, and they're putting more and more concern. The ability that a neighbor can actually open your garage door because it's tied into an IP address they can hack into. So security is a large portion. So we are adamant concerned about security because our financial customers are saying you gotta follow our standards. And so the Wi-Fi approach, as you bring that into it and how we carry that securely up to our network, is so important. So we end up using the existing Wi-Fi system. We don't integrate with the network at all. We pull that information from there, add our edge device, and we go up to the internet. And so we're a little different approach on it.
Well, just a clarification. So Wi-Fi, especially the 802 standard, is probably the most aggressive in terms of if there's something wrong, they fix it quick. It's a gigantic global community. But so what you do is the Wi-Fi measures, if you can trust your phone to make bank transactions and whatever, then you can trust to use that connection to control your equipment.
That's correct.
Okay.
And what's ASHRAE is coming up with some new standards on the building automation side of it. So they have an SC standard for the BACnet. So that's going to be driving some of the cases. How does that information transfer? How much information do you have of the building? And what's the way we go on? We do not send any information to the building at all. Not at all. The information in the building itself goes up to the internet. We compare it to the previous data we had last minute, and we say if there's a change, we change it. And so therefore, what you get from when you're reaching into the cloud, it's just a comparison. So we don't get any information into the system. It resides within the building itself, no access anywhere else. So that's a concern. So if you end up having a device that doesn't have the right kind of security and somebody can get into it and potentially take that information over, that becomes a risk. And it's a risk for anybody associated with that information. So a large portion of it, and that's been our driving place, is that we got to maintain security. The demands have continued. Makes it difficult how your passwords are. Our guys ourselves are rolling their eyes like, oh man, I can't use that consistent password. I got to have all these funny characters. It's really driving the password managers into a new business.
Totem trusted. We'll talk about that next show. But yeah, there's a solution out there for exactly that, and that's what we Eric and I were on board when that IoT actually became defined as IT, information technology, OT, operational technology, and they merged together on the same network so that operational technology is much more vulnerable than people realized, and the people that were performing and executing the operational technology weren't very well versed in cybersecurity, would rather not have anything to do with it. And we've seen in 24, 36 months, that's changed incredibly. Now, basically the as Eric mentioned before, risk, liability, everybody's becoming super sensitive to who who's doing what on the network and where's responsibility. Everybody's responsible, so everybody's got to pick up their share of that. And I'm glad you brought that up with the cybersecurity, because I mean that's we do control trends, and cybersecurity has been in the top control trend for the last 6 years. It started out back, I think it was 2014, and in 2015 we actually gave a cybersecurity award out to Fred Gordy, because
Awesome.
he trained us, he brought us on board, he gave us some basic checklists. Don't do this, do this, do this. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But you know, it was tied to into the Niagara world, the framework there, where they
Yes.
start to put into you know, making default the biggest problem we had in the world was people weren't changing default passwords, or they use one password for every single job. You know, so we've come a long way. So it's great stuff.
Well, Kenny, you and I and Mark have something else in common too. And Mark, this is so much fun. I mean, this is our first time meeting you, so it's really great. Seems like we're kindred spirits here. But Kenny and I, for a while, have been very passionate about trying to attract younger people into our industry, and I understand that that's also a passion of yours. And so, tell us about that, if you would.
Someday I'd like to quit this industry, but not for quite a while. But in order to do so, I need to get some people to follow in, because it's such an important role. So that is very much my passion. That's what I look forward to, is to educate people to understand how this goes, and so that it's such an opportunity of an industry to move into. And you can do so many different avenues. So you get introduced in the HVAC industry, you can go into distribution. You can do everything from, if you want to drive truck, if you want to stock shelves, if you want to deliver, and you can do that. If you need to help the counter guys and solve the counter type of opportunities, you can do that. You can be in the back side of it, be a product champion. You know, we love to have a product champion, somebody that knows it in distribution, that we can keep educating it, you know, that go-to. You have those product champions. You have the applications selling the products, but you get outside of it. You can do the control world. We need people to really understand how to make controls work in a building. They understand the HVAC to be able to put the controls into it, to do it right. How many times do people not even understand the HVAC side when we're trying to explain the controls? And it's like, you can't do that. It's just not going to work. But then you got the manufacturer reps, the engineering field. Some guys just, you know, I just can't work for anybody, so I'm going to get a truck and I'm going to go out and solve my customers' problems. And that's a great avenue too. We fit in really well with that. They say, you know, I just need something that I can really solve my customers' problems, and TCS can give that solution. So that exactly is what we need to do. How do you educate them? How do you learn from them?
Well, Kenny, what was the rate? You were tracking a rate of how many people were going to be the glut in terms of, or the dearth, I should say, in terms of the loss of jobs as people retire, and how many more jobs need to be in.
Renee Joseph from Johnson Controls came up with a study that pretty well socked the industry in the nose, letting them know that by the year 2024, 60% of the HVAC industry was going to retire. And that was exactly that list, that laundry list you had: facility managers, building operators, control salesmen, sales engineers, product support people, application engineers, distributors, contractors. You go into meetings in our world, and you know, we call them the white hairs. You know, you look from the back of the room up front. You know, and you know, it's kind of spooky that there's not another generation. Something happened between our generational baton passes, and we skipped at least one generation, maybe two, where nobody had their, you know, because a lot of our businesses started up in the family, and you know, and that's how a lot of women got into our industry. Their dads, you know, were career HVAC people. They did a lot of really important work locally. They supported the churches. They supported the, you know, the post office. Everybody knew who the guy was to fix their heating and cooling. And so in this evolution of things, as you said, our industry was never given its you know, parity with the other, you know, with airline pilots, bankers, investment guys, you know, whatever.
Rock and roll stars.
But HVAC actually provided a lot of people a great living, and it was kind of like, you know, my children to this day have a very difficult time understanding what I do. They don't understand.
Yeah.
I go on trips, I do this, I do a lot of talking, I make a lot of noise, I cry a lot, you know, complain a lot, you know, rip my hair out trying to get paid, whatever it might be. But the reality is that now we have an exciting industry that has technology based interesting stuff. In other words, we're So we're getting some pull, but it's like the people that are coming from the IT world into our world have difficulty understanding HVAC. They have
Right. No, and I think Kenny, you're really hitting on it, Mark. This is a great conversation because this has got to be a common quest for all of us in the industry. Everybody that's listening, the older people, we got to attract them. And listen, part of my sell is this. I mean, especially because we're seeing so many more IT people that are coming in that, you could go work in a cubicle farm in Silicon Valley if you want to. And that could be challenging, but this is one of the few industries, if you really care about the planet and the environment, if that's a passion for you, this is one of the few industries you can have a direct effect on it. And not only that, if you use Mark's product, you can actually, pull the sheet out and show all your friends or how much money you save. So it's
how many trees you saved. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic industry. And, of course, we won't go into the details now, but if you look at what you can start, I know what some of my contractors are paying people even to start from service contractors on. You're commanding a huge premium. They'll train you. I mean, if you just lay it out. Now, Mark, you got to help us with this because you and Kenny got hair. And I told Kenny,
oh dear,
I know we will have completed our mission. Okay. When, you got a rock and roll star, you got a Silicon Valley person, maybe you got a banker, you got a lawyer, and then you got a controls guy all in a bar, and a beautiful woman walks by and says, "What do you do?" "Well, I'm a rock and roll star." "What do you do?" "I'm a banker." "What do you do?" "I'm a lawyer." "What do you do?" "I'm a doctor." And they get to the last guy, "What do you do?" "Well, I'm in the building controls industry." And she goes, "You're the one I want." We've accomplished that. Our marketing job will be complete.
That's good. That is an uphill climb, baby.
Well, I don't know. You guys got some great hair. So, I mean, I think it starts with the hair. I don't know.
I don't think the hair the reality is that I think we have had other people on the show and some really good experts, that we don't even have a federal code that describes building, building service technicians, building automation specialists. We don't have it. We haven't even got a facility, or we haven't even got the federal code number, the NAIC, whatever that number is. But we've talked with certain people that are beginning that. We're competing against, guidance counselors in high schools that are measured on how many people they put into college. And regardless of what happens after that freshman year, their measurement stick is, we got, 70% of our high school students go on to college. They don't say how many kids go on to HVAC or tech school, and there's no, I lived in Europe 9 years, and I can tell you over there, it's quite different. They do a sorting process with your aptitudes and whatever that occur maybe in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. By the time you're coming out as a teenager, you're going to go into the trades. You're going to go into, whatever the higher level to learn academics or mathematics or engineering. But if you're the local steam fitter in Germany, like the irony was, my wife's German. I go to Germany, and we learn each other's, families and cultures. And her father is a steam fitter over in Germany, and he can't believe that we sold Honeywell. He says, "I don't believe it. Come on." And then, so when we find out that we actually had this common thread, I learned a whole lot about the German version of it. And he was one of the most important people in their town, and because everybody, the boiler would break down for this building, or boiler would break down. And he couldn't say no to these people because they were his neighbors or whatever. And I got to see how I've actually went out with them a couple of times and learned, their version of a lot of hot water. They don't use steam in Germany, but to make a long story short, I did regard, and the last point there was Der Spiegel, the German magazine equivalent maybe to Time or Newsweek, had like 9 pictures of professional men on the front of their cover. And they asked the reader to rank them in terms of salary and professional regard, and the HVAC guy was about 4th. So he was ahead of the banker. He was ahead of people. The doctors, of course, were first. I think pilots were second. Engineers were probably third. But the regard for if your child was picked by this aptitude process because they had skills in mechanics and they knew how to fix things and they had an aptitude for it, that wasn't, you weren't, necessarily embarrassed or ashamed because you didn't make the high level math contest to the gold student there.
So
And
what
I think,
what you're telling me is that Rita's dad, when he was in the bar and the girl says, "What do you do? What do you do? What do you do?" There were only 2 or 3 people that were ahead of him in that pecking order.
well, I guess if you want to keep, well, you know what, I think it's important just to have this conversation because, believe it or not, Mark, we're going to have people that are going to say something to us a month from now or 2 months from now if this thing airs, and they'll say, you know what, I got a kick out of you saying that, because the reality is this is the only way to spread it. You have to make yourself important. You have to blow your own balloon up and say, hey, look, without us, you don't have hospitals with maintaining critical air temperatures and humidities. These data centers, everybody just assumes it's going to get done, but they don't understand the intricacies and the wheels and the amount of people that are responsible for that building being comfortable and being, having a successful enterprise inside of it. There's a whole lot of stage work being done that is not seen,
You talked about the unions, and I'd like to expand on that because the unions are doing a great job with training. And so these guys can join into a union. They can become a steam fitter, or electrician, or a plumber, and they're training intensely. And in many cases, they're going to the technical schools to do that. So it is a great avenue because those guys will put them to work. They can be a handyman. They can kind of help, grab the hammer type of thing. But they're teaching them like every other Friday. They're a full day of learning and going through professional training. So it's a great avenue to expand on that. So if that person's not sure about what their direction, get into that, learn that, get your hands into it and understand it. And if you choose to carry that forward, if not, distribution could be a great avenue. There's a lot of skilled guys that says, I just worked my body too hard and I don't want to do it anymore. But I love to help guys that are continuing to look for understanding. And that's
right. Well, you're so right. I applaud that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kenny, remember our guy too, Mark, you might want to look this guy up too. He's been on Control Trends, a guy named Brian Lovell. Mm-hmm. And Brian is really been lobbying in Washington to sort of, create those standards that Kenny's talking about. So we got a lot of people that are working on it. We all have to keep the thing rocking and rolling.
Needs to be, there's so many buildings out there that need your product put inside of it correctly to get the places up to speed and always go with that energy savings. But Gary said, that's a given. You better be able to save energy. But right. Can you increase comfort and can you increase productivity inside that zone or that workspace? That's now the real measurement. That's the real metric of criticality.
Well, Mark, you want to hear Kenny's elevator speech?
Yes, I do.
Because I think you got to get, say you have the really short speech. So in a few seconds, you can tell people exactly what you do. So Kenny's elevator speech is this, especially if it's an attractive young lady. I'm the guy that heats you up when you're too cold and cools you down while you're too hot all the time, saving you money.
That's awesome. That is a perfect one.
Okay,
he's a wordsmith. He's a wordsmith. All right, Mark. As we sort of wind down here, we like to do a little thing on the show called "Let's Make a Control Deal." So for our audience out there that might want to try your product or get more familiar with you, do you have an offer that we can put out there for the Control Trends community?
Well, I haven't finalized all of this. I got to get some more marketing approval on that, but I'd certainly love to. You buy a stat, get a stat, type of thing, and so that would come through your distribution. I'll work out the details on that. Something in regards to that. So we find that when people have the opportunity to demonstrate our stats, that's when they say, wow, I didn't know it. I didn't know this is great product out there. So getting your hands on it is the best way. So
listen, a couple of things we're going to do, because this is how we play Let's Make a Control Deal. We'll wait for finalization on that. Kenny and I'll put a post up on Control Trends so you guys can be looking for this. And this has been very successful in the past. So I appreciate your willingness to play Let's Make a Control Deal. And for our audience out there, it's not final yet, but we will post it on Control Trends as soon as Mark has something worked out. In the meanwhile, you can look for your local TCS distributor. One of my favorites is stromquist.com. We have all the stuff on TCS on the website. But for people who maybe prefer a distributor with more hair, Mark, how do they get hold of the TCS? What's the best website for them to reach out to you guys at?
Best way is the website, tcsbasis.com. We end up having webinars like you talked about. We can get direct contact. So you send a contact, we'll get back to you promptly.
Awesome. Mark, man, it's been so much fun talking. Can we get you to come back on the show maybe in a couple months or something? Might keep us updated?
We can follow up on what's going on with COVID and what happens on how controls are such an important part about it. So I'd love to do that.
Right.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, sounds good. Mark, thank you so much, man. Have a great day, and we appreciate you. TCSbasis.com, Mark Meller.
Thank you, guys.
Have a
Right,
great one.
they had high quality information or products then, but then I think what we're seeing here is they're surging back into the market. They're coming in through distribution, and they realize the
Right.
value that the distributor plays. And I think had tremendous success in their initial business model and channel, and they're evolving. So it's good to see them back on the main stage.
Well, we're doing real well with them. We have them at stromquist.com. There are other distributors that have it too. But if you can't find one, hey, we'd love to take your money and give you some good product there. So, but that being said, Kenny, a special thanks to our friends at TCS. We'll be hearing more from them. And dude, let's get back to our favorite cyber cop, Fred Gordy. And how about introducing him, and let's get that show going.
Absolutely. We have Fred Gordy. He's the director of cybersecurity at Intelligent Buildings. And as we all know, Intelligent Buildings, they've got some really, really important things to say. It's a new era of building risk, building owner risk. And Fred and Mike are going to tell us about it. Welcome to the show, Fred.
Welcome, guys.
Hey, thank you both for having us on today. As always, it's a pleasure to get with you guys and just have a little informal discussion about what's going on in the world. And today what I want to do is I'm going to kind of hand the ball over to my colleague here, mostly because, as you guys well know, I started this journey many years ago now. And my side of the house, I guess you would say, has been around the assessments and, digging in and getting into the nasty side of the world. Whereas what Mike has done, Mike McGee, and he'll give you some background on himself, is Mike has taken all the principles and the ideals that we put together and actually put together a really nice program that we offer to our clients around policy compliance, and even more. And so I'm going to hand it off and let him introduce himself. Mike?
Sure.
Hi.
Thanks, Fred. Oh, God. I didn't mean to cut you off there, Eric. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk to everyone today. Excited about it. And as Fred was saying, and you guys alluded to it, I'm coming at this from a little bit different perspective. From my understanding, a lot of your guests have been integrators, control techs, and/or engineers that are specified in the system. I grew up in the architecture world doing commercial architecture for about 15 years. I quickly in that process learned that I wasn't a designer. I was more of a systems guy, figuring out how pieces and parts move together to create an entire building and/or an entire system. So I was doing a lot of the construction administration. That led into an owner's representative position where I was seeing the buildings from a pre-conception period all the way through the owner occupied a couple of years after they're in there, and understanding that entire process and how they're actually using the buildings and some of the missteps along the way, and looking at improving that process. So we look at cybersecurity, we look at a lot of the people that are probably listening to this podcast, they're seeing individual segments of that process. They're either working on a control system that already exists, they're doing a major renovation of a control system, or they're doing new construction. But what are the tools they have in front of them that are going to broadcast or communicate the cybersecurity wants and needs of the owners and of their business practices? They're really limited right now. So I think that's one aspect that we really need to look at. And then the other aspect of it, and we can dig into this pretty far, but when you're maintaining a system, how are you conveying that you're a trusted vendor and you have that full trust of the owners when you're in their system, especially remotely?
Well, that's a good pivot point, is that word trust. Eric and I have realized through some of the guests we've had on Control Talk now, that the whole concept of trust, and whether trust is just about the building, about people entering a building, about the people controlling the building, and now cybersecurity. Can you trust the people that are handling your automation systems? Do they have the policies in place? And then I think, Michael, what you were saying too. By the way, Michael's the director of managed services. I apologize, my introduction did not fulfill the introduction completely. Where managed services is a whole different concept. The way I see it is Fred, with that background, you've got an operational technology cyber center there, and that's cool looking. But you've always you were the first one to bring us along with operational technology and how that was different from informational technology, and how they converged and literally became IoT. But you made this aware of that. And I think what Michael, you're telling us is that the policies are in place, but that's really not the end of the journey. That there's got to be some real serious follow through, right?
Right. And when we're talking about trust, If somebody comes in and does work in your building, a contractor rolls his truck up, comes in, the first thing that happens is you check their badge. So you're checking their credentials as they walk through the door. You're introducing them to a building engineer, and there may be a chaperone depending on the level of security with the building, but at least you're walking them to the closet that he's going to be doing work. You're unlocking it, you're propping the door open, you're letting him do his work. And as he's leaving, you're going back and checking to make sure that he's not leaving soda bottles there, candy wrappers, that he didn't put holes in the wall, that the fire stopping is still in place if he was running wires through your building. And then, as we're leaving, the building engineer's checking him out and saying, okay, great, I'll approve your PO or I'll sign your work order. That's their traditional sense of maintenance that we know today. Now we're moving, even before COVID, we're moving into a remote support model where control techs don't want to go to the site anymore. They want to be able to remote in from an office, from their home or some remote location and go in and do work. To make that happen, you're setting up a firewall rule, you're setting up credentials within the platform and within your internet security devices to allow these vendors go in and out. We're not checking their credentials other than their login, which may be shared amongst the whole control tech firm. We're not checking what times they're coming in and what times they're leaving. You don't even know when they've done their work and completed it unless he sends you an email afterwards. So how are we doing those inspections? We're not able to physically check their credentials. We're not physically going back and checking their work to make sure that they did what they were supposed to do. And again, if they're leaving candy wrappers in your mechanical closet or your electrical room, what kind of footprint are they leaving back in your computers and your cyber security framework that may come up later to hurt you? So the only thing we've got is an honor code and trust. And I think we really need to develop that. And then owners need to be able to audit that or maintain it or have the vendors report on it to maintain that level of trust.
Right. Well, Mike, I tell you, I couldn't agree more because as Kenny Smyers is fond of saying, in God we trust, and all else can get data, and all else get data. So it seems like you guys are able to facilitate that. So speak more about that if you would.
Sure. We're doing a couple things. One is we're developing a managed services platform that's going to allow us to go in and audit these vendors to report on how they're doing. Are they complying with general best practices and or a specific cyber policy that the owner has developed? So through a series of questions, through a series of interviews, and even some validation through network scans, we're double checking, behind these vendors, how are they reporting it, validating that they're reporting it correctly, and then going back and reporting the owner with a remediation report that they can do to fix their problems or their issues that were identified. And we go in knowing that nobody's perfect. I mean, everybody has moments where things are not completely aligned or not up to best practices. The owners aren't aware of it because either the control vendor isn't being forthright or the system may not be able to handle it. As you said earlier, the OT versus IT. Everybody's used to an IT level cybersecurity. OT devices just aren't there yet. I think they will be, but we know that it isn't. So understanding that there's an issue, maybe quarantining it, maybe locking it off might be the best way. Fred and I were talking about an example, and I'm going to steal your thought here, Fred.
Go ahead.
He came across a elevator system that was running on an XP machine. Or I'm sorry, not even XP. What was it? Was it XP?
NT.
On a 386 processor. So this is a high-rise building that's running equipment that is probably 25 years old. And although the program is pretty simple and it's probably pretty bulletproof, that 386 is only going to last so much longer. And once it bricks itself, how are you going to replace that machine? So we know that there's a problem. If that problem were to break, that's a six-figure plus fix because you're having to go and fix all these control systems or upgrade the control systems. That's happening in a budget year that you did not plan for. If I know about it, one, I might be able to research a backup. Number two, I can start budgeting going in 3 years, I'm going to have enough money in my budget that I can do the renovation that's needed. And it's done on my time and not an emergency fix.
Well, I want to add a little something to that is what Mike is doing. You guys heard me say this time and time again, we got to make a culture shift, right? Integrators have been doing things a certain way for, 30 years. Well, in this particular case, what Mike is referring to, what he has put together is, I hate to use the word force, but what it is it's setting up a way by which the vendors are being held to a standard, but it's also changing the culture. For example, when I went and did this assessment, this elevator vendor was notified that he's supposed to be on site, but he just didn't show up because he didn't see any use. And when we contacted him, his whole excuse was, well, we're not hooked to the internet. And I said, but we're still supposed to verify. That's what the customer hired us to do. And so after a little bit, he finally told us where it was. Well, the gentleman that was the head of FM there, he was new. He didn't really know where it was. He was trying to get his knowledge up. But anyway, so the elevator guy finally told us where it was. We walked in the room, and then we saw what Mike just described. Well, that's not a cyber risk, but that's an expensive operational risk. And so that's the thing. We're looking at both the cyber and the operational risk of this and changing culture.
Yeah.
So as Eric mentioned, you have to have a tool or something to facilitate this kind of a extensive effort. I mean, this is A to Z, and then you come up with policies, but what do you all have? What do you have in the inventory to take to an owner, a facility manager, or any of the partners involved in the cybersecurity link? How does intelligent buildings, get started and then put the policy into place and then enforce it?
So we've got a proven methodology, and we really like to start where we're developing that cybersecurity policy with them. So Fred has done a lot of work to make it a streamlined process. It's not quite, choosing off of a menu. There's discussions and there's thought behind it, but it's not a 4-day workshop, to develop this. Get it done in roughly a day, be able to provide a policy, a complete policy, and a summary that addresses today's most important issues. Then we moved into a way to audit the vendors. Their automated surveys are sent out through a tool. They're scored across a common platform, common scoring. I think it's about 35 different questions. So we get that information back. Then we'll do remote assessments when needed to do the validation and to understand some of the answers that are coming back. So that may be scanning the networks. That may be individual interviews with the different system vendors, the building engineer, and in some instances, actually going to the site and doing a hands-on audit. So all that information is compiled. Unfortunately, that's, this is where the human part comes into it, because we all have to look at it and distill that information and analyze it. And then we develop our reports, which are, plus or minus about 30 pages, going through the different types of systems, identifying the risks, and identifying remediation that's immediately actionable. So there will be items of things that the customer can do, the owner can do, as well as, in the case of that 386, identifying some longer term things that they need to start budgeting for so they don't get surprised.
And one thing to add to that is, Mike said we've streamlined the process, and he's absolutely right, because you guys have also know this, that our industry is very immature. And so we need to put it in a way that it's not overwhelming, but at the same time, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have depth and value, but it is something that these people can look at pretty easily and say, oh, I see what I got to do.
Yeah.
And that's where Mike.
I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Well, no, what I was going to say, I want to put it in a little bit bigger frame, because intelligent buildings has been around, for a while, Fred, even before you got there. And, and because, again, it's like you can have the best process or whatever, but unless people buy into it, they're just not going to do it. So now you guys got the tools to validate and all. But what I wanted to comment on is, Mike and, Tom Shurtleff and Rob Murchison, You know, you guys, even before you really got into big into cybersecurity, your guys' sort of claim to fame was bringing teams together in a building and getting everybody on the same page so that whatever you decided to do as a group got done. So, you know, because I think there are others that can address cybersecurity and maybe have tools for it, but I think you guys are unique in that you guys have the soft skills too to get everybody on the same page. Is that a fair statement?
It is. And again, that goes back to my owner's rep kind of background, bringing everybody together, understanding the bigger picture, getting them to work together outside of the traditional design and construction tools that are there now. And also having the foresight to know that IT needs to be involved or other parts of the owner's team need to be involved much sooner than what they are. You are probably seeing this in your construction, especially new construction now, but as you're moving into a more IT network and an owner managed or a representative managed network, those IT classes have to be done much sooner than the contractor really wants to do them. So alerting to that just from our experience with construction and doing that coordination, getting those people to the table sooner has been a big help.
You know, I've been nagging Fred every time I see him. I ask him for what's going on, what's next, and I remember back, you know, we were talking about, you know, some sort of a like NIST, you know, driving standards. And is there any federal standards being right on the surface? Is the insurance world, you know, calling for a more invested interest by anybody that has a cybersecurity potential problem and it's part of their insurance risk and liability? Have the manufacturers, have they get on board? Are they understanding their responsibilities? And finally, Fred, do you, Michael, do you see Division 25 actually coming and sharing some of the burden for cybersecurity and actually putting a mention in there or a standard or requirement? You know, in other words, as you guys are digging into it, I'm sure you're experiencing some pushback and some apathy, and then, you know, who's going to pay for it? I mean, so, but if you have standards and codes and you see these things starting to bear down on our industry, operational technology in particular, is there anything developing on this federal levels, insurance levels, and you know, manufacturer levels?
Kenny, you're asking some great questions, but you know, I'm having trouble tracking because I heard about 4 or 5 really good questions in there.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah.
For the sake of our guests, start with one.
Eric,
and then
I'm working with Fred Gordy. He can handle it all. Fred's already wrapped up all the answers.
He's already hacked your brain, dude.
No, okay. Here's what I to repeat it again. The cybersecurity has now become a center stage item. As you know, we do ControlTalk awards and we do the top trends in our industry. And cybersecurity went from a distant 9 to like 4 to 111. Every year, cybersecurity has grown in importance. My question was the federal government. We know NIST has a standard, but just doesn't seem to be any enforcement. So my question was: are there any enforcing forces coming to bear so people must address cybersecurity?
Great question.
And the second corollary,
just let him answer that. And then
is there an insurance? Is there an insurance carrot that if you do the cybersecurity measures that you get a reward?
Okay, that's a great place because they actually kind of coincide. And then I can take those and the things that beyond that, you know, with Division 25 and stuff like that, Mike could definitely field those. But the bottom line is, yes, NIST is waking up more to the fact that IoT or OT is a new and different, in the sense of guidelines. They released in 2019 a guideline called IR 8228. It's not like some of the other reads where it's hundreds of pages. It's digestible. But the whole point is it can be boiled down to 3 statements, and I'm not going to quote them verbatim, but basically what it all means is NIST has finally realized or has acknowledged, maybe it's a better way to put it, that you cannot manage or protect OT devices like you can IT devices. Now that comes straight from NIST. It acknowledges the fact that OT devices interact with the world in a physical way, not just like with data. Okay, so that all being said, those guidelines, they also realize that the infancy of the industry is these are guidelines and these are things that you should aspire to, but it's not that they're going to ram it down your throat today. Okay, I mean, from a business standpoint, if somebody tried to take all of this on at one time, you might as well just start over. in order to get your systems up. From there, those kind of factors, those guidelines have awoken, especially, and Mike can speak a little better to this than I can, is because he has direct interaction with a couple of these customers, is what they're seeing is these building owners buy and sell buildings like we buy and sell cars, right? So they're seeing this as an opportunity to help take the policies that we develop, the compliance mechanisms that we use, and present that to insurance companies and say, hey, look what we're doing. We're trying to mitigate our risk. We're trying to lower our risk. What can you do to help us on that end? The other end is, when you get a certified pre-owned car, there's a stamp that comes with it. Well, what we're doing is these building owners are actually using that to sell to the next owner of the building to say, hey, look, this is more marketable because we've already done this. So.
Yeah, so Fred is much more attuned to the standards, things like that. The question that you asked, though, is being able to enforce them. Unfortunately, cybersecurity is not viewed as a life safety issue today. And I think that's the bridging between code enforcement and, the standards that are out there today. They really want to manage life safety. This isn't viewed as we're still in the guideline phase. We're not enforceable yet. And it's also more of a brand issue and a personal integrity issue than it is, that life safety. So we're in this weird infancy of that, where I think as more attention is given to it, insurance companies are aware of it, but I don't know of anybody who's actually been able to reduce their rates as of today. But I think as that comes in, there's going to be a financial driver, which is going to make this more required. Right. Circling all that together and going back to some of your other questions, NIST is a beast. And, anybody who's looked through that, it's an overwhelming document. We've got an industry that is so glutton in their ways right now that moving is going to be hard. What we're trying to do at IB is not throw everything away and create new systems or get everything to an A immediately. We're just trying to gain momentum. And honestly, if we can get people off of the starting line and get momentum in this direction, the rest of it will follow through, because personal pride, understanding of the liabilities that are out there will make vendors want to do a better job. But they can't even see that today. And we've also got owners who can't see it. Fred and I were on a meeting Tuesday with a customer who had a cybersecurity breach where their cameras were taken over, or at least compromised. And we're talking to them about their building automation system, and they still didn't quite get that it's a liability out there that they need to address. Wow. So here's somebody who had one incident, right, and not seeing how that transfers over to other things.
No, I got you. But, and so what I hear you saying is the adoption rate's not what it needs to be. But, Fred, right, you and Mike been doing this for a while. Are we trending in the right direction anyway? How far are we, and how far do we have to go in terms of adoption?
I think we're making great strides. The strides we're seeing are owner-driven. I'm not seeing where the vendors are necessarily taking it on themselves to improve their stance until the owner is willing to drive that home. And it's not even a financial thing per se. It's renewal of contracts. It's getting preferential treatment when it comes to procurement. Those types of things are what's driving these vendors.
I have another question, Michael, since you brought that up. It seems like operational technology needs the cybersecurity policies and measures and enforcement mechanisms, but it seems like the IT people got to pay for it. Is that the perception I have? I mean, because, it's like IT's somehow, it seems like it falls under the responsibilities of the IT department, but yet the operational technology departments, the people, the facility managers, the people that make everything work, the boilers, chillers, whatever. I mean, there seems to be a disconnect in that construct where, the one person that really understands it and enforces it with data, do they have an inherent responsibility to oversee the operational side, or is it the operational side's
two facets here. One is, I think, a new career path is going to develop which is more an OT technology person who can enforce that, because your general IT person doesn't understand OT well enough to do it. You had also mentioned cost. It doesn't cost anything to set up individual passwords for every user and get rid of the shared passwords. There's a lot of things that can be done for no cost or minimal cost that are going to make these systems more secure. People are just set in their ways, or want it out of convenience where I can just do engineer, and all my guys can use it. We don't have to worry about it. That keeps me from putting a sticky, on the computer monitor with my password written on it. We got to get away from that mindset. So when we get into enforcement, I think IT is going to still carry the burden of the internet connection and the firewall rules, but there needs to be somebody on the OT side that's taking responsibility to check things like passwords, understanding who's maintaining the system server, Windows upgrades, things like that. Am I doing it? Is the vendor doing it? It's not hard to click that button and say update Windows, if you're that person who's in charge of it. Making sure the vendors aren't just creating users because somebody was out sick that day, understanding the user list and auditing it. There's simple things that can be done with a minor IT background that we're not doing today. And again, that goes back to getting that momentum going. Let's start by doing that. Let's start by looking at the remote access to make sure that we're doing it in a secure way, that you don't have a BBMD sitting out there that somebody can access through the backnet port, that you're not natting something through on a public IP address. There's simple things in a firewall that IT can set up that's going to secure those systems too without having to know about the OT part.
So Mike and Fred, I know you guys can tell us this because there are horror stories that you guys have witnessed. Without giving away names, could you guys give us a couple of 4 examples of people that think maybe this isn't that big of a deal and they don't really need to do it, and what it cost them?
Yeah, so Fred, I'm going to start this and then I'll turn it back over to you, because I think one of the big ones that we found was a customer that we were working with a fairly large portfolio. They took pride in the fact that they were going back and upgrading a lot of the building control systems and creating a centralized database or a centralized data center where the control applications were living and people were remoting into the data center to control the buildings. I love that philosophy. Where they didn't fully understand the OT is when they took these centralized servers out and virtualized them, all the underlying equipment was still there. So there was a BBMD that wasn't addressed, and we were able to take a look at that BBMD, and it actually exposed every building that was on that server in that data center. So now we had access to about 35 to 40 different buildings through that one legacy BBMD that was left there. So they didn't fully understand the migration. Their vendors weren't digging deep enough to make sure it was secure. They thought they were doing the right thing, but they really weren't in the end. They left a large security gap in there.
I just want to make sure everybody in the Control Trends community understands BBMD is a BACnet IP broadcast management device used to distribute BACnet broadcast messages through a network consisting of TCP IP subnetwork. So I think most of the folks on the Control Trends community understands that, but just for the sake of it, you said something really interesting, and even your title, I think you talked about career paths. Managed services are becoming so important that they've kind of done an end run around everything. Because I mean, it started, I think, with the software maintenance agreements, and everybody hemmed and hawed when Windows kept bumping people up, from XP to 2000 to where we at now. I don't even know. Windows 10 and still causes problems with people's networks because it likes to mess around with host IDs. And managed services is becoming very important. I mean, very, very important. And cybersecurity concerns could be very functionally intertwined with that managed service department, don't you think?
True, and we're seeing it now, I think, bouncing back, and I'm going to take a step back. 5 years ago, cloud-hosted services came out, and everybody was looking at SaaS and managed services that way. I think there is a little bit of tightening of the belt and brought those services back home or back in-house for a little bit, and now people are starting to see the value of it, and COVID is expanding that a little bit more because we can't have the desktops anymore since we can't go in the office. So people are looking more to those cloud-hosted servers and cloud-hosted systems as well as managed services. We're even seeing that in the government now, which was traditionally on-prem type solutions. They're opening up to more of a managed or a SaaS type scenario. The other thing is you're getting the best of the best, much like a SaaS where you're constantly getting updates. Your managed services, you're able to outsource to people who understand the systems more than you and are able to manage it. And for us, the managed services are really after policy compliance. So making sure that the vendors are keeping up to date on the current cybersecurity policies and best practices. We also have an arm that's actually managing the remote access. So through a series of devices, we're able to provide very strict protocols on how people are coming in and out of the systems. So that's the two main parts of the managed services that we're into right now. And if we're doing both of those, we're doing really well, and we're above average on most any portfolio that's out there.
So I want to, for our audience that wants to work with you guys and engage your services, because again, our Control Trends audience includes everybody from consulting engineers to building owners to systems integrators to distributors. Are you guys primarily working directly with the business owners? Do you guys also work with systems integrators? Do you work with distributors? If so, sort of walk us through how people can work with you guys through the different chains.
Okay. Do you want me to take this one, Fred, or do you want to start with that?
Go ahead.
Okay. Most of our portfolio now, or most of our clientele, are building owners because those are the people who are carrying the risk, per se. We are working with a couple large integrators to look at the policy audits as well as the remote access. We want to get in touch with people who understand that this is a priority in the world and who have the ability to create that momentum. So we're not really picky about it. The system integrator and the building owners are probably best. When we get into the consulting engineers, their ability to affect change within the owners is a little bit harder. But when you're managing the systems themselves, that's where we're really providing the value.
Well, Fred, speak if you would about Totem, because that's a product I know both Kenny's company, Jackson Controls, and Stromquist handle, and so that is another product you guys have that kind of works as a version of what Michael's talking about, correct?
Yes, and actually, Michael has been integral in helping work with those guys to kind of get them set up. Now, understand that what we do is a deeper dive, if you will, but the product itself, and Michael, keep me honest, but the product itself is a good way by which to get a temperature read on where you are as I would say as a vendor, or where you are as a building. So it's definitely the place to start for sure. But to go kind of culminate everything that Mike was talking about earlier, and then adding in my broken record piece about culture, is you can go through all those exercises and you can, get a temperature read of where you are. But if you don't have a plan in place and you don't have a methodology and you don't have somebody basically holding you accountable, the change is not going to happen. And we can, I'll move into one little horror story real quick. Is one particular customer, very progressive. They are doing a good job of getting things tightened up, but they had one vendor who was a well-known name, basically on a call with them. And they weren't aware that the customer was on the call, and they were raking us over the coal, telling us we didn't even really understand what BACnet was. And one of my guys, or the guy that was on the call, he's actually the guy that taught me how to program, so I know he knows what BACnet is. And this guy was just obstinate. And Mike, I don't remember if you remember exactly what he said, but it was pretty bad, right?
Yeah, he was basically saying that he has all these people come and tell him that he doesn't know how to program his system, and how to make it secure, and why were we just one other person telling them that? And the owner finally chimed in and said, this is so-and-so, this is the person who holds your contract. These people are smarter than you. You need to listen to them. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and my point is you need somebody in your court, so to speak, that is going to help you through this process, because if you run into a vendor like that, and I know you guys know, Eric and Ken, that the people that we have in our stable, if you will, have years and years, like me, these other guys, we know this industry. And so when they're talking out of the side of their mouth, we can at least pull them back on the track,
Yeah. And I'm going to come back to Totem. Sorry, Eric, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm going to come back to Totem in a second. On a similar line, we are working with a building now who was repeatedly told by both the service vendor, the design engineer, and the control manufacturer that there wasn't an internet connection to the system. And we kept digging and digging and digging and asking certain questions, and we find out that it's actually connected to the internet, and there's a public IP right to the login screen. So this person has been working with these, or the facility manager has been working with these sets of vendors for 2 years now, convinced that there was never a connection, and it's sitting wide out open on the web. So I think you need that experience, because even with Totem, vendors are going to answer things a certain way. You're going to get a lot of data. You're going to get a benchmark through Totem, their interface. You still need somebody to analyze that data and oftentimes validate that data is correct. And unfortunately, through an online web tool, you're getting the data, but you're not getting that second part. You're not getting the verification. And then, as Fred said, you're not getting the program to start driving it. We saw the same thing with fault detection. When that first came out, everybody was buying it going, this is going to save me energy, save my maintenance, all these things that it was touting. You spend $150,000, $200,000 to set up a platform within your building. If you don't use the information, you've got $200,000 as a budget line for nothing. And same thing with Totem. It's great information if you've got a program and you've got the staff or the team behind it that can take that information and utilize it to drive results.
Well, I think too, just to chime in on Totem Trusted, is that it's more of an economy of scale. In other words, you guys are working on national levels. You got global customers, and you work with the governments, and I think that's just a whole different playing field than what Totem Trusted is oriented for. That takes some of the most important aspects of it, and it breaks it down into a more sizable level for contractors and distributors to work one-on-one in their market areas.
Exactly. And I guess my experience is coming from the owner side. But as a contractor, subscribing to Totem, becoming a Totem Trusted vendor provides a marketing badge that you can now take out to your customers and go, look, I'm already doing best practices. We may be able to make some changes to align with your cybersecurity, but I'm better than the guy sitting next to me because I'm already gone through my methodology, proven it, and I've got documentation, another key section, documentation on how every system is set up within my portfolio.
Well, I think what they did too is they paired some of the more sophisticated stuff you all had and put it into a very usable document. Yep. And again, I made the comment about career paths and managed services. What I am seeing in our market area is contractors and distributors, in order to provide more value added to their customers, they're adding these parts of managed services that include Totem Trusted, include the software maintenance management, it includes different things. And they're bundling these services now, and it's actually becoming a revenue stream. So I think we're going to see more and more of it in the future.
Right. Even our local government is looking at that here in Charlotte. Being able to bring in an MSI who's going to sit above all the biddable work to make sure that the standards are being upheld. So somebody who is knee deep in that, they can bid out the individual projects, but that MSI is going back and validating that the data stream coming out of the building is the way it's supposed to be. The points are named the right way, and the supervisors or whatever application servers are set up correctly.
You know, I'm glad you brought that up because I had that written down here, Division 25, when I hit you with that hurricane.
Yep.
I hit you with that hurricane of questions. I was suffering a fit of enthusiasm. I apologize, but
Fit of
That's
enthusiasm.
okay.
I like that.
the Division 25 to me it's like our magic bullet or our you know, our magic wand, let's say, you know, because I think cybersecurity should be in there, and I think ASHRAE has a responsibility to address it, and I think you know, it should be part of every single, you know, new opportunity is to make dang sure you're not opening, you know, the Pandora box. Close it.
Right.
Close it at the onset.
Well, and there's an industry learning curve here, and it's just starting. Because before, your control vendors were only looking at Division 23, and that's all they cared about. So now they need to look at Division 25, they need to look at Division 27, which is networking, and bring all that together. And unfortunately, a lot of them are slow to the mark to get that going. Because I have discussions on the construction project I have now, where they say this is all we need to do, and we go, here it is in Division 25, that you were supposed to integrate to the lighting system, that you were supposed to do demand response, things along that lines, and they just weren't picking it up. So I think from a construction side, there's got to be, we got to get over that learning curve, both on the individual vendors and the GCs, to make that happen. I agree that's where we need to start putting in a lot of the cybersecurity, or at least mention a policy and then provide it outside the specs. It's just tough, and the industry's just not grabbing it yet.
I will say this, I had a discussion with Steve the other day, and I know that I may be speaking out of turn, but I know that I told him is looking at some kind of integration with Division 25. So, you know, maybe something.
Yeah,
to,
they've done some spec work. Yeah, they actually have
Yeah.
a proposed specification inclusion. And that's why I applaud them. You know, again, I think, you know, I remember the first time I saw you on the stage, I think it was a Realcomm, IBCon. What was it, Eric? About 2000, let's see, we got 2020, it's probably about 2012.
I think it was like in 1917 when it
And
Yeah, that
you
was
were on the
it.
stage, and there were some pretty impressive people. And you guys, I mean, it was decked out. It was a beautiful stage. You had these.
Oh, that was
lights.
Niagara Summit.
Was
Yeah.
it Niagara Summits? And
Yeah.
you had the space age, you know, AV set going, and you said, first thing you said, this is a journey. I remember you just said, because somebody asked you a question like, you know, when do I begin and when do I end? How quickly can I put this thing to bed and kill it? And you said, you'll start here and then we'll see you on down the road, because this is a journey. And every time
Yeah, and the thing about it is it hadn't changed. I mean, and it frustrates me sometimes when I'm sitting on a panel sometimes, and you're wanting to play nice, but I hear these people, if you just go do this and you do this and then do this, then you're going to be fine. And they're talking about 853A, you just input, you know, and I'm like, you're asking somebody in the first grade to figure out college algebra. I mean, because that's, you know, and this is nothing, I'm not saying that in a negative way. The industry, it just hasn't been a priority. So let's don't open the fire hose. Let's give them a drink of water and kind of get them built up. And that, you know, you've heard me say this too before. It's the old thing about the two guys running from the bear. I mean, sad to say, is we just want to get away from the bad guys, right? One guy stops to take his shoes off, and the other one said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I can run faster with no shoes." And the guy says, "You can't outrun a bear, but I can outrun you." So if you're like some of the things that Mike said, you know, just getting the public IP on, getting the single user out of there. The bad guy is inherently lazy but persistent. So they're going to only hit something a little bit. If they can't get there, now they go on to somebody else. So
yeah,
I got
Fred,
you.
I'd also add that your journey doesn't have a defined endpoint. There's going to be rest stops along the way, but every time we think we get to a good plateau or a good point, the needle's going to move again. So this is something that we're starting, and it's going to be with us for a long time.
Yeah, Michael, as those great philosophers, the Allman Brothers said in one of their songs, "The road goes on forever." So
Yep.
Yeah. So again, if you're looking for a career, this is you're probably going to have job security for the next foreseeable 100 generations at least. Yep. So Kenny, before we wrap it up with our guests, Fred and Mike, any other questions before we wrap it up?
No, I wanted to just say thanks again, Fred and Mike. Michael, it's very important that we keep doing this pulse thing. You know, I think this pragmatic approach, you know, where you have every so often you review it, you know, and just, you know, you'll catch people that will listen to this part of the show and it'll stick this time. And I think you just can't. It has to be relentless, gentle, relentless effort to put this forward. And to your point, Fred, back in the old days, in law enforcement and security, there was the 4 Ds. You know, deter, detect, delay, detain. But the first comment in this was that you can't stop crime, but you could send it somewhere else. And it's not a very cool thing to say or whatever, but the reality is
It's
to make
true.
yourself, is to reduce your vulnerability and reduce your risk. You know?
So guys, again, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. For our listeners out here who want to get hold of you guys, find out more about what you do and maybe engage your services, what's the best way for them to get hold of you guys?
The website's got contact information on it, so intelligentbuildings.com, and start there. If you're looking, especially for a sales opportunity, I don't know if we can make our email addresses public.
Yeah, we
for
can.
this webcast. Yeah, so I'm happy if you've got questions, reach directly out to me. Email is probably better than phone right now because with all the spamming, if I don't recognize the number, I don't always pick it up. But an email, I'll make sure to address.
Perfect. Can we get Rob Murchison's cell phone number to give to our audience?
Sure.
Oh yeah, hold on. Yeah, we'll give it to you.
I'm teasing, boys. Hey, guys, thanks so much, Fred. We'll get you back in about 4 or 5 weeks, and
Sure.
let's keep it going. Michael, thank you so much. Really do appreciate you.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the
guest this
opportunity.
week. All right, Kenny Smyers, man, Mike and Fred just did an absolutely fantastic job. I mean, you know, Fred's been preaching the same message since we met him. I mean, it's a message that doesn't get old. It's a little bit like, you know, you go to the doctor, you get a checkup when you get to be a certain age, just because if you don't, the consequences can be pretty dire. You're kind of playing with fire if you don't. And I think what Fred and Mike and the team at Intelligent Buildings are putting together is just some powerful, useful tools.
I'm most agreed. The importance of the cybersecurity and how it affects us is just growing, and it's good to see that we've got some forces within our industry that are helping us get there and making us understand it. And again, gentle, relentless pressure. It belongs in the first realm of considerations now. It was a backseat thing moving forward. And you know, as more and more people are victimized by ransomware and cybersecurity attacks, again, it becomes more and more critical to have the first step measures to be able to get on board, get things going in the right direction, and reduce your vulnerability. And like we said in the show, or what Fred said, you know, harden yourself just hard enough to make the person go elsewhere. You can't stop cybersecurity attacks, but you can send it elsewhere.
Very, very cool. All right, big dog. Well, listen, it's been a long show. We appreciate your patience. A special thanks to our guests this week, and a special thanks to our sponsor of this week's show, GC5. And with that, Kenny Smyers, remember, be bold, stay in control, stay relevant, and wear a mask.
Indeed, Eric.
Indeed, Kenny Smyers. And that's a wrap. All right, dog.
Some may say I've lost control, but truth be told, I'm not the same no more.